What is up, harvesters? Welcome back to my subscribers, and if you're new here, welcome to Hobby Harvest. My name is Ken. So today I want to talk to you guys about the 5 habitat improvements you should focus on if you're brand new to improving habitat for wildlife. And now, even if you aren't brand new, there'll still be some value in this video because you'll get reminded of some of those things we often just take for granted and overlook. And so these are going to be some basic things, but they're going to be important to keep in the back of your mind, even if you are experienced at doing this. So first of all, I want to give you a spoiler alert. The 5 things do not include food plots. So there's a reason I'm excluding them from this list, and that is because if you are very brand new to this and this is your first year doing this, there are other things we should focus on first because they don't take as much time and effort as food plots. And there's also a very good chance that your first year of putting in food plots, they're not going to be as big as they need to be or the acreage that you need because of the size of the deer herd in your area. So there's a really good chance that they're going to just get buzzed down to nothing, and you're going to be left with dirt patches going into the hunting season. And if you don't do these other 5 things that I'm going to talk about in this video, you're going to end up having absolutely no attractions on your property heading into the fall hunting season if these food plots do fail. Now, don't get me wrong, they are the #1 most important habitat improvement, but we want to do these other 5 things first if we're just getting started. So #1, the thing I want to talk about is bedding areas. So one of the reasons we want to start on these types of things right away is stuff like bedding areas are going to take years to develop into really good bedding areas, and we don't want to lose this first year, which will put us behind a year every year from now on out with how thick and lush that those nice bedding areas get for your deer herd. So what we want to do is kind of go over our whole habitat improvement plan on our property. If you want help with that, I do have videos on my channel. They're more a broad overlook of what you're trying to do. I obviously can't give you specifics for your specific piece of property, but you can get a good idea of what you're trying to do there. And so what you want to do is imagine where your food plots will be eventually, but you want to figure out where those bedding areas are going to be too. They're typically going to be in like the back corner of your property or maybe in like the middle of your property if you have easy access along the borders of it. But you're going to want to get in there. If you're in a big wood situation, you're going to want to get a lot of those high canopy trees down. You're going to want to get that regenerative growth started. So by removing the canopy, removing all of that sun blocking foliage that's up in those high trees, you're going to get that sunlight down to the forest floor, and all the stuff down there is going to make up for all those leaves that were missing up there. And now all of that growth is going to be down at the level where the deer can get at it. So what they need in a bedding area is cover and browse. So you are going to get both of those by doing this. So if you can just get in there, open up that big canopy, or if you are in a big field area, you're going to want to be doing things. If it's a wetter area, trying to get stuff like red osier dogwood established, you can be putting in clones of that into the mud, and they should start growing. I usually get about a 50% growth rate, even if it's not in a super wet area, higher if it is in a wet area. But you're going to want to start getting those shrubs planted, those trees planted, start getting that stuff in those areas to get those thick areas with that browse. And so #2 on the list is going to be switchgrass. Now you can try to make bedding areas with switchgrass, but it can't be 100% switchgrass because they won't eat it. They still need browse in there. So you're going to want like a mix of like say red osier dogwood and switchgrass to provide that cover and that browse. Now, there's a whole bunch of other shrubs. You're going to have to look into your specific area where you are, what regionally is good for these types of things, but cover and browse are what you're looking for. Things like pines and spruce are not good for that, although they are good for cover. They do not provide browse for the herd. And so pines and spruce do have a use in the habitat improvement world, but it's usually to cut down on sightlines, which we're not worried about right at this moment just yet. So the other thing we can do with switchgrass is we can use it to screen our food plots and our hunter ingress and egress. We can really use it to hide our stand locations and how we're getting into and out of those stand locations. Now switchgrass again takes 2-3+ years to get it established to those really, really good stands that you guys see on social media that guys post that they're saying, hey, look at how awesome my switchgrass is here. And that's why you want to get those started right away too. Now, maybe you don't know exactly where your food plots are going to be, so you don't want to be necessarily screening those just yet. But if you do finish up these 5 things and then do get started on those food plots year one, you want to be considered screening them as well. And then, like I said, you're also going to want to be screening your hunter ingress and egress. You can do that with switchgrass. You could also use those pines and spruce if you're very certain on where you're coming in and coming out. Remember your wind when you're going in and out, not just when you're on stand, though, when you're trying to do that. Now, the third thing that you're going to want to do is make man-made deer trails. So I did a video a while ago about how I can guide deer exactly where I want them, and I will link that at the end of this so you guys can go check that out. But what we want to do is make man-made deer trails that connect those food sources with those bedding areas. If you have a very thick property, this is going to work very good for you because deer are creatures of efficiency. They will want to walk those easier paths through the woods if you allow them to. It's the same thing with us. Like, we don't like walking through the woods and getting hit in the face with branches. So if we can walk on a nice trail, we'll pick to walk that nice trail instead. And so when you're making these, clearing these out, they don't have to be anything too special. Just if you yourself can walk on them without getting whacked with branches, without having to push branches out of the way and letting them fling and hit your buddy behind you, that is exactly what you're trying to do here. Deer will walk on those trails. Now, the biggest thing to keep in mind, though, is don't make them like a big, long shooting lane. Deer do not like walking down big, straight, open areas like that in the woods, so they will always cross them instead of walk down them. This is a huge misconception in the deer hunting woods, is that typically when we're hunting with bow, we need them to get close to us, so we'll sit on like a field edge or something. Deer follow edge as well, like edges of field, but we'll want to sit where we'll get them close to us. But then when guys go out gun hunting, they sit where they can see for hundreds of yards in every direction, with the thought that the more I can see, the more deer I will see. And that's actually not true, because the deer stick in the thickest part of the woods and they move through the thickest part of the woods. So it doesn't matter if you can see across a field. Yeah, they might come out on the edge of it and feed right before dark, but for the most part, they're going to move through that thick part of the woods. So that's where we want to be, even when we are hunting with a gun. So just because we can shoot 100+ yards doesn't mean we can't also shoot 20 yards when they're in a thick area of the woods right underneath us. And that, of course, is where the deer are going to be, not out in the open. And so that's also why you don't want to make these big, straight, long shooting lanes in the woods. The deer will avoid them, or they will just walk across them perpendicularly. They will not just follow a straight open area through the woods. The same reason why you don't see them like following down a road or following down like a power line. They'll cross it, but they don't just follow it. They don't like being out in the open for that long. So we need to create these things in the thick part of the woods, make it easier for them to travel there from point A to point B. Go check out that video. I'll link it at the end here to see how you kind of connect all of these improvements on your property. But that brings me to the next thing. So once we have these man-made deer trails built, we want to sweeten them up with number 4 and number 5, and those are mock scrapes and water holes. So mock scrapes, if you don't know how to make them, I've got videos out there how to make them. Other guys have videos out there how to make them. You want to make sure you have a mock scrape at every single stand location. And a great place for a stand location, other than on top of your attractions like your bedding areas, which would be a morning sit, or your food plots, which would be an afternoon sit, where you really want to be hunting is these lines of movement between them. So make sure you get your cameras out there. I will actually link the cameras I use down in the description and in the comments. You guys can go check those out. You guys see the B-roll for them here on this channel. They're actually a really good quality for the cost of them. They're not the big name brand ones. I was actually talking to somebody on social media this week about how he had one of the big name brand cameras and they got a little bit of frost down in Georgia and the camera quit working. And I was like, well, man, if that camera doesn't handle a little bit of Georgia frost, it's definitely not going to handle the big north woods of Wisconsin winters that we get. And so I definitely have been having those cameras up in the big north woods. We're right not that far off of Superior, so you really do get those like gales in November. You get all of those storms coming off of that frigid water up there in Lake Superior. Get a ton of precipitation, a ton of cold, a ton of wind, and these cameras have held up for years and years for me. I'll link them down in the description so you guys can go check them out. They're really worth the value that you get out of them. Now, with putting up these mock scrapes on these man-made deer trails, get those cameras out there, see where the deer are moving, and then set up these locations based on where you're already getting good natural movement. So you may not have your food sources in yet. The deer may not be completely bedding in these new bedding areas, but you're going to put in these man-made deer trails, and you're going to see which ones they're using just based on where they're bedding and where they're feeding otherwise. And so you sweeten that up with a mock scrape. And if your area doesn't have a ton of water, you're also going to want to put in water holes. Water holes are especially good during the rut when the bucks are running all of that distance chasing does. They will stop to eat and they will stop to drink. Don't let guys tell you that they just run themselves to death chasing does. They will especially come to water. So you definitely want to have that water source out there. These are great things to place on these man-made deer trails by your stand locations, which are also screened so that you can get in and out of them without being detected. You know, keep all of these things in mind. Go check out those other videos. If you guys feel like you got some value out of this video, go ahead, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And if you like this video, YouTube thinks you'll really like this one. So go check that out. Otherwise, go check out that other video, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.